Welcome to Spells and Spoilers, the podcast where we dive into all things supernatural. This season, we're starting with Charmed, so grab your spellbook and your popcorn, and let's get magical. Welcome to Spells and Spoilers, a rewatch and reread podcast. I'm Aleacia.
And I'm Elizabeth. This season, we'll go minute by minute through every episode of Charmed, giving you all the details and diving into the magic, the drama, and everything in between.
That's right. Each week we're going to break down one episode of Charmed, and today we're recapping Season 1, Episode 11, Feats of Clay.
But before we get started, just a quick reminder to follow us on social media, subscribe to the podcast, and leave a review if you're enjoying our deep dive.
So, I'll be honest, not my favorite episode.
I agree. I did not care for this episode at all.
I think it was meant to be like a really exciting intro, and then when I got it, I was like, this is weird. Like, I'm not into it.
Yeah, I did not care for it. I did look up the word feats to see what exactly that meant, which it means brave and courageous, or like fearless.
Mm-hmm.
So I do feel that the title was fitting for the episode because one of the characters' names is Clay.
Right.
And, he does eventually become selfless and fearless and brave.
Right. And it's a play on words, like the clay of the urn and stuff. Yeah.
Yes. So I do feel that went along. I think that was very appropriate. But for me, it was kind of hard to just get into the episode. Really.
Yeah, same. I'm going to be really honest, listeners. Today's not the day for me. I'm not excited about this episode. It's raining outside. It's just a whole mess. So we're going to get through it. Hopefully we'll make it entertaining for you, make it more entertaining than the actual episode.
Yes.
But this just wasn't my vibe, which is unfortunate because I really like ancient Egypt and Egyptian culture and stuff. And so I was bummed to...
Yeah, because there really wasn't much history in there.
Yeah.
Like, it was just mainly about the curse, but even then, there's not a whole lot revealed about the curse, really.
Yeah, and I personally feel like if there would have been more... Like, if the guardian of the urn had been, like, an ancient Egyptian goddess, like, from mythology... I would have been so much more interested.
Well, give
her a name.
Not only that, but if she were to have been present more as well.
She had 4 lines.
Yeah, have her more involved. Yeah, I think.
We do start the episode in Cairo. There's 3 men in a house, and one of them smashes some glass onto the floor, the glass of the window. They reach inside, open the door. He says, "Told you, piece of cake." And our main character, Clay, says, "Let's just do this and get out of here." The original man who smashed into the house, his name is Wesley. He tells Clay to relax. He says, "No one's home. The owner is dead." Another man who's with them, his name is Palmer, says, "Stay here and keep watch. We'll get the urn." So the two of them go into the house. Clay stands at the doorway, and Palmer is asking Wesley if Clay knows. And Wesley says, "Why spook him? He probably believes it was the curse that killed the old man." Palmer says he was stung to death by a scorpion, Wesley, in a bathroom of an airplane. Wesley tells him that that's stupid, basically. He says, "You don't tell me you believe in that crap." Palmer says, "Do you think I'd be here if I did?" And then they see the urn. It's like a deep blue. It's got gold in it. It's very beautiful. I think Prue later describes it as like lapis, which was very common for that time. And he asks if that is it. Wesley says that it is and asks if he sees any scorpions around. Palmer says, "Nope, just $signs. Let's go." And we see a picture on the side of the urn that is like inlaid in gold, glow, and then disappear as Clay comes up. Clay tells them that there's a car coming, and he thinks that they might have tripped an alarm. So they all leave. 2 guards come in, and the 3 men hide behind some, plants. Clay says, "I should have never let you guys talk me into this." Wesley tells him to shut up. He says, "We'll split up and meet in San Francisco. Give the urn to your friend and hawk it right away." I'm interested in this. How did they know that Prue worked at the auction house?
Well, so I think that Clay had told them that he knew someone, Phoebe, who had a sister that worked in artifacts.
Yeah, but, like, before she was at the museum, so I guess that makes sense. But, like, so maybe that's from, like,
more
the past.
specific to the auction house.
Yeah, but I feel like we find out in the episode that they haven't talked in, like, 5 months or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, and why would Phoebe be talking to him about Prue's job? I don't know. I just found it, like, a little bit strange and convenient.
Yeah, I mean, he could have been doing research on it, too. I don't know.
Yeah.
That is a good point.
Palmer tells him not to think about ripping them off because he will find them. And Clay leaves. Wesley starts walking away, but he stops when he sees, like, magic dust floating in the air in front of him. The dust forms into a woman. We learn that she is the protector of the urn. She tells him, in fact, that she is the guardian of the urn. And he's like, the what?
Yeah.
She touches her ring, and then Wesley's chest, and a spider appears. And he starts yelling in pain. He falls to the floor. And the guardian says, you are being punished for your greed. As for your friends... And then we cut to San Francisco 3 days later. Piper and Phoebe are walking down the stairs in the house. And Piper's talking about Clay because Phoebe is going to meet him. Piper says, I thought you said you never wanted to see him again. She said, ancient history, which I thought was funny because of the theme of the episode.
Yes, I do like the little jabs to the plot.
Yeah.
Because this is not the only one that they use.
Yeah.
So I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah, Piper's like, 6 months. Phoebe says 5. They get to the bottom of the stairs and Prue is there. Phoebe continues saying, he's just stopping by on his way home. It's not a big deal. He's traveling or something. Prue asks who Clay is, and Phoebe is very quick to be like, nobody. But Piper rats her out. She says, her ex-boyfriend, the musician. She met him when she was working at the Rainbow Room. You remember? Prue says, no, I don't. Nobody told me. They hired you at the Rainbow Room? Piper says, yeah, she was the hostess until she started working at the Chelsea Pier. And Phoebe's like, okay, no, thank you. Like, let's talk about this later. And the doorbell rings. So she says, a lot later. We're just friends, that's all. Do I have lipstick on my teeth? Piper tells her that she does. So she, like, rubs her teeth with her finger really aggressively.
I love how Piper shows her sassiness towards them.
Yeah, because Prue says that was mean, indicating that there was no lipstick on her teeth at all.
Yes, I do love how she does the little jabs towards Phoebe this time, because usually it's Phoebe that is calling people out or teasing, but it's reversed.
Yeah. Phoebe opens the door. Clay is standing there, and he's pretty handsome. He's a pretty handsome guy.
Yes. I did notice, I could not get over the color of his teeth, though.
Oh, yeah?
Like, they were very yellow to me. Mm. And I don't know, maybe, because that's like one of the first things you notice about someone is their smile. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, there's nothing against yellow teeth or anything, but for an actor, I thought that was quite interesting.
Interesting. I didn't notice that, but I don't know. Maybe I was looking at the rest of him instead. I
bet you were.
Clay tells Phoebe that it was really good to see her. They hug, and Phoebe has a premonition of her and Clay in bed together. Mm. The premonition ends with Phoebe smiling, and they stop hugging. Clay asks if she's okay. Phoebe says, uh-huh. And they cut to credits. At Quake, Piper and Prue are sitting at the bar. Prue is asking what else she doesn't know about Phoebe. Piper tells her that she is a little bit judgmental, and that is why people don't tell her stuff.
She's very offended that they did not confine in her.
Yes.
But rightfully so, because she is very judgy.
Yeah, she is. Prue says, that is so not true. Okay, maybe it's sometimes true. I just don't understand why Phoebe never even told me about this guy. Piper tells her that people just don't like to dwell on things that end badly. And Prue says, yeah, well, I wish my relationships ended that badly. Did you hear them last night? There was music, there was wine, there was... Piper says, talking. And also, how did you know there was wine? Prue admits that she peeked. Like, little stalker.
Why not, right? Like, that's what sisters do anyways. Or roommates, for that matter.
She tells Piper that if nobody tells her anything, she's going to get creative. Piper says, stop worrying, she'll be fine. And we see a waitress walk past, and the bartender looks at her, and the bartender immediately goes to drop a tray of pint glasses that he was holding, and Piper freezes them before they hit the ground. She says, she knows what she's doing. Watch that entrance, make sure nobody comes in. And then she walks around the bar, she picks the glasses up out of midair, straightens up the tray, puts the glasses back on the tray, and then he unfreezes. She says, whoa, Doug, easy. The bartender, his name is Doug, thanks her and says he hopes that Shelley, who was the waitress, didn't see that. Piper says, oh, don't worry about it. You just hang in there. And she sits back down. So Prue is like, girl, what was that? Piper says, what? I don't know what you're talking about. And Prue says, you know, the guy, the glass, do you do that often? Freeze time in front of, oh, I don't know, let's say everybody? And Piper says, yeah, I'm finally getting some control over the unfreezing. The poor guy, he just keeps dropping everything. Prue suggests that Piper fire him. And she says, the owner wants me to. Actually threatened to fire me if I don't. But Doug's just going through a hard time right now. Shelley, the waitress, just dumped him after 6 years. Prue asks if she's playing Cupid at the risk of her own job. And Piper says, well, yeah, I mean, Doug loves her. Even bought an engagement ring and everything. He just waited too long to ask. So now he's a wreck. Prue says, still, you can't just keep, freezing in order to protect him. Piper says that she knows and asks if she's still going to Buckland's. Prue says, yeah, that's where I work. And Piper says, I just figured after everything that happened with Rex and Hannah, you'd be hitting the classifieds. Prue says, well, if we don't save the auction house, I might have to. And she starts to say something about Rex and Buckland's going bankrupt, but Doug is coming out of the kitchen carrying plates, and he trips, and Piper freezes him again. Piper asks what she was saying, and Prue is like, literally, never mind. I gotta go. I do not want to keep having this conversation while you keep freezing Doug over and over and over again.
Which I really don't see what the big problem was about that.
Yeah, I mean, everyone freezes. It's not like they're seeing anything.
Yeah.
But Prue leaves. Piper walks over to Doug. She shakes her head. And then we cut to a scene at the park with Clay and Phoebe. Clay says, I wish you could have been there, Phoebe. You would have loved Egypt. Pyramids, giant sphinx, Nile River, camel taxis. It was amazing. Phoebe asks if he really rode a camel. And he says, hey, they're friendlier than some of the cab drivers I've met. Believe me. Phoebe kind of laughs at that, says, can't imagine they're faster. And they look at each other. It's kind of like a significant look. And he says, you were right to leave me. And she's like, and the conversation turns. He says, no, I'm serious. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I blew it. I know that. What, too much too soon? Phoebe says, yep. And they laugh, and she says, look, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but why are you here with me now? Clay says, why? Can't a guy visit?
Come on now.
I'm rolling my eyes.
Yeah. That is a very fair question for her.
Yeah. Phoebe says, yeah, but you're not just a guy. You're Clay, and Clay comes with strings attached.
Yeah.
He says, I can never hide anything from you. And she tells him that actually he can, and that's the problem.
Red flags?
Yes.
Red flags, anyone?
Yeah. He says, I picked this urn up at an overseas market. Thought it might be worth something. So she asks if he wants her to get Prue to help him because of the auction house. He says, guilty, and she says, phew, for a minute there, I thought you were here to win me back. So how did you feel like when she said that? Do you think that she was like a little disappointed?
Yeah. I felt like it could have been like a slap in her face.
Yeah.
Like he was literally only reaching out to get to her sister, not to really see her. She's just the bonus.
Yeah.
Like she's not the priority.
Right. Yeah. It was definitely a moment. I was like,
But she also kind of goes with it still.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's not very like self-confident really.
Right. She's still like chasing him the whole episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which many people can relate to that.
Yeah.
But still, it was kind of sad, I thought.
Mm-hmm. He says, no, Phoebe, I think too much of you to still believe you're interested. Look, it's no secret I've been in some trouble, gotten in too deep. I just thought if I could sell this urn, make some money, pay off a little debt, I can make a fresh start. Think about it. Please, Phoebe? And we cut to Buckland's in Prue's office. Claire is there. She's looking through the files. This is our first time meeting Claire. But Prue walks in and she's like, literally, who are you? Claire says, you must be Prue. And she says, I'm Claire Price. The bank assigned me to see if the business is worth salvaging. I'm looking for inventory records. The files in my predecessor's office were empty. Prue says, yes, well, Rex and Hannah weren't exactly qualified.
Which I thought that was pretty funny, though.
Yes. Claire says, obviously why Buckland's is in such dire straits. To be honest with you, Prue, I don't know anything about auction houses, and I know even less about art. But what I do know is the bottom line, and if we don't move $1.2 million worth of inventory at the auction tomorrow, I'm shutting the place down.
Could you imagine, like, as an event planner, if you were told that it needed to be done within 24 hours, less than 24 hours?
Yeah, that would give me a heart attack, I think. I would be like, I'm sorry, no, this is not happening.
I guess Piper could relate to that from the episode of The Wedding, where the chef went to France and left her hanging. So she could probably relate to Prue in this situation, but I could not imagine. Like, I mean, I feel like I can work under pressure really well, but in such a short notice, I'm not sure how I would handle that situation.
Yeah. I mean, one time, like we've planned weddings in like as little as 4 months. And that's very stressful. I could not imagine 24 hours, especially if you're hoping to make a profit. There's so much that goes into an event where you're trying to turn a profit.
Mm-hmm. Well, with them, they've got to make over $1 million.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, what?
Yes. So Prue says, excuse me, did you say tomorrow? And Claire says, did I stutter?
Sassy. I would have said something. I'd be like, I get that you might be in charge of this, but don't talk to me like that.
Literally. I don't even know you.
Exactly.
Prue says, with all due respect, you don't just get to decide to throw an auction, okay? You need advance notice, a catalog, buyers. Claire tells her that it looks like she has a lot of work to do then, doesn't it? Okay, Claire.
Such, bitch vibes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big time.
Phoebe and Clay walk in as Claire is leaving, and Clay is carrying the urn that we see in the first scene. She asks who that was, and Prue says it's the new sheriff.
But at the same time, I kind of wonder if Claire knows that Prue can pull it off. Like, maybe she's done her research on her and background check, and maybe she's just got that confidence for her. But I'm just not sure if that really is the angle or not. Yeah,
no. Well, and then she's like, I don't know anything about auction houses. Yeah, clearly, because you don't even know that you can't throw an auction in 24 hours.
I feel like I would slip up and say that to her.
Yeah.
I'd be like, you're not my boss. I don't think.
Yeah. Clay and Prue introduce each other to themselves, and Phoebe says that she needs a favor. Clay was hoping that maybe you could sell this for him, and she hands the urn to Prue. Clay says he picked it up at a market overseas, and Prue says, picked it up? Does that mean you bought it?
Like, she's immediately sus of him.
Yeah. Phoebe asks what else that could mean, and Prue says, well, it's really beautiful. Gold inlay, 24 karat, a lot of lapis. Looks to be from Egypt. Clay tells her that that is where he was traveling. That's where he got it. And Prue says, this etching is quite interesting, very unusual. Clay asks if it's worth anything, and Prue says, well, I would have to determine the urn's origins, its previous owners. Phoebe says, oh, couldn't you just, skip a step or two? Prue says, Phoebe, I cannot risk this auction house's reputation with something like this without checking on it first. Fair, especially because, you're about to be bankrupt, so...
Well, yeah, she's already got... her job is already jeopardized.
Yeah.
Because of Rex and Hannah, so... It makes sense.
Yeah, not a good time to be asking for favors, Phoebe. Really not.
Yeah. Especially for someone that you haven't been in contact with for over 5 months and that shows up out of the blue.
Yeah. Phoebe offers to cook Prue dinner, and Prue says, don't threaten me. I'll see what I can do.
That was a pretty good line.
Yes.
I thought that one was probably one of the funnier ones out of the episode.
Yeah. Clay thanks her, and Phoebe says, is she the best or what? And they hug. She says, thank you, I love you. And then Phoebe and Clay link arms, and they leave. Outside, Clay is telling Phoebe, thank you for doing that. Phoebe says, no problem. Prue can get you a great price for it, too. She's really good at her job. And Clay says it would be nice if she could like me a little bit. Phoebe says she likes you. She's just real protective of me. That's all. And Clay tells her that he remembers when that was his job. He puts his arm around her, and Phoebe says, yeah, and then I quit you. We see Palmer from the original scene walk up behind them. He greets Clay, so they turn around. Clay says, Palmer, what are you doing here? And Palmer says, I'm bumping into you. Are you two going to introduce us? Clay says, oh yeah, sorry, Phoebe, this is Palmer. I met him in Cairo. Phoebe remarks that it's a small world. And Palmer says, so what's going on with that urn? Like, he just jumps right into it. Phoebe asks, like, wait, you know about the urn too? What's happening?
I feel like that was kind of like a second moment where she was like, okay, what else? What's really going on? Because originally, I think the first point was when he told her that he was there primarily for Prue.
Right.
And then all of a sudden this happened. So I think that was her second moment where she was kind of maybe suspicious.
I agree. Clay says that that's where they met, the marketplace where he bought the urn. And Palmer says, yeah, right. The marketplace. Right. I thought you were going to sell it. Clay says Phoebe's sister works at the auction house and she's looking for buyers as they speak. Palmer says, that's good. That's good. Sooner the better, I guess. Phoebe asks if Palmer's okay because he's like crazy. He's like in crazy mode.
He looks like he
looks like a tweaker.
Yes. It looks like he's on drugs or like lots and lots of anxiety. Paranoid.
Yeah.
He looks paranoid.
Yeah. He looks like he is crashing out for sure. Palmer says, yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. Thank you. It's just, I'm a little tired. Jet lag, you know? Are you staying at the Ashcroft like I suggested? Clay says, yeah, sure. And when he said that, I was like, no, he's not. Like the way he said that, yeah, sure. No, you're not. Where are you staying at, Clay?
It wasn't very convincing.
Yeah. Palmer says, me too. Maybe we'll hook up later. Clay agrees, and Palmer tells Phoebe it's nice to meet her. Phoebe says, you too. And then when he leaves, she turns to Clay and says, ew, creepy guy.
She is not wrong.
And then Clay changes the subject by asking if she's hungry. They leave. And then our next scene is at the airport. We see Palmer walk up to a customs officer, and there's like a big wooden box, unfortunately. The customs officer asks if he can help him, and Palmer says, I was a friend of Wesley's. His family wanted me to make sure he got home all right. The customs officer asks how he died, and Palmer says that he doesn't know, that he thinks it was a spider bite, and he asks if he's going to JFK. The customs officer tells him that it's going to the first flight in the morning, and Palmer touches the box when the officer leaves and says, sorry, Wes. And as he walks away, we see the guardian of the urn appear. Well, first, before that, we see the image, the like blue image. It's on the side of the box. It almost
looks like a card.
Right. But it was on the side of the coffin box, and it disappears, and as Palmer walks away, then she appears. So we see that little transitional moment. Buckland's again. Prue is on the phone. She's talking to Piper, and she says, what am I supposed to think, Piper? Phoebe's ex pops up into town and wants me to sell something for him. You think that's a coincidence? Piper says, Prue, you wonder why you're out of the loop. You worry too much about Phoebe. Prue says, no, I don't. I just don't want to see her get hurt, that's all. Look, I just get this really bad feeling about Clay. I can't explain it. Piper says, I can. You don't think he's good enough for her, just like you didn't think Jeremy was good enough for me. Of course, in his case, you were right, but that's not the point. Prue says, no, your point is that it's none of my business, and you're probably right. Speaking of playing matchmaker, how's Doug? Piper says he's the same, unfortunately, except that she's getting a little freeze-frazzled because she's being drained. Yep. Prue asks if she doesn't think maybe she can find a better way to deal with the Doug situation before she gets fired.
You know, like she's supposed to, and fire him.
Right. Piper says, I know. Oops, gotta go. And she hangs up. Shelley walks past Doug, and he knocks a vase over and drops like a tray of silverware. Piper tries to freeze him and is not successful. She says, sorry, Doug, too poop to pop. She turns and walks away.
She's like, I'm done. Whatever.
Yes. At the manor living room, we're with Phoebe and Clay. They're eating Chinese in like candlelight.
Yes. Have you ever done that before?
No.
Me neither. It's always on movies or in books, though.
I know.
Mainly movies.
We should do it.
We should. We could do Chinese and podcasting.
Yes.
one of these nights.
Let me know if you want to see a live. We can all together do Chinese and candlelight. Clay is telling her that he's surprised that she moved back there. He says, I remember a few late nights, a few beers, a few not so pleasant conversations about your sisters. Here you are, living together again. Necessity or choice? Phoebe says, I think it's a little bit of both. Anyways, things have kind of picked up at the Halliwell Manor. Clay asks how, and Phoebe says, well, let's just say San Francisco has been a lot more unusual than New York. More rice? Like, let's change the subject, actually, before we get too far into this. Clay says no, and he says, Phoebe, you really haven't said much about what you've been doing. And she says, protecting the innocent from evil.
Like, she was 100% serious.
Yes.
And honest.
Yes. But he tells her to be serious because he thinks she's joking. Mm-hmm. He says, I mean, you've barely had a spare minute in New York. 3 jobs just to afford your social calendar. And now here you are with 0 jobs.
Which I kind of, again, feel like that's a slap in the face. Yeah. I almost feel like he's manipulative as well.
Yeah.
Because he's, like, convinced her to get with Prue on all this. Mm-hmm. And then, like, the little comments he makes about how he really is there for her, but really he's not.
Yeah. I will say, though, that, like, it's kind of natural, I think, for people, like, when people show up from your past to, like, kind of revert back to the person that they knew.
To place, yeah.
And to negate some of the change that you have made. Mm-hmm. Especially when it's somebody that you were romantic with. I think that that's really natural.
Because they're going to expect you to be the same person.
Right.
And not change and have growth.
Yeah. So I do think that it, like, makes sense. I don't know. The whole thing is skeevy. Yeah. Phoebe says, things have changed. I've changed. And Clay says that he's trying to change too. One thing that won't change, though, is how I feel about you. And they kiss, and they, like, stop kissing. Phoebe kind of breaks it off and he says, I'm sorry, I shouldn't. And she says, no, it's not that, believe me. It took me a long time to get over you. I just want to be careful. Clay says, I understand, but if I cleaned up my act, would you consider moving back? And Phoebe laughs and says, do not go there now. Prue comes in. She says, sorry to interrupt. And Phoebe is so cool about it. She says, it's okay. It happens. Mm-hmm. Okay, remember that later, Phoebe.
Well, that, and I almost feel like it was kind of a saving grace for her, too. Like, maybe the moment was getting awkward for her.
Right. And then I, like, found it funny because she, like, the way that she had reacted, because when Prue was trying to have that date with Andy, she was like, absolutely nobody can be in here. How dare you be? And Phoebe's like, it's fine. We all live together. It's bound to happen sometimes, But Clay says, I should get back to the hotel anyway. And he stands up and he starts cleaning up the Chinese. Phoebe tells him to stop because she's going to clean it up.
Which I felt she was kind of, like, aggressive about that,
She was. She literally says, stop. I got it.
Yeah, like, I was like, whoa, girl. Calm down.
Yes. Clay asks Prue how it's going with the urn. And she's kind of evasive. She just says, it's going. Phoebe says, I think what he's trying to ask is it going, gone? Prue tells them that she put it on the auction block. Clay says that it's great. Thank you very much. And Prue says, well, I'm still waiting on the background check to come through so I can set a reserve price. And Clay says, well, whatever you get for it is fine with me. That is the most suspicious
statement. Prue catches on to it big time.
She says, yeah, as long as it sells, right? And fast.
Mm-hmm.
And
I feel like Phoebe, like, she's just trying to look at the good in him still, and is kind of naive on that part. Whereas Prue, she is very judgy, and that's kind of where Phoebe is coming from in why Prue is acting the way she is. But at the same time, I feel like Prue reads people very well.
Yeah. Clay says, well, from what I can understand, if anyone can do it, it's you. And he kisses Phoebe and tells her that he will call her tomorrow, and then she's going to show him around the city. He says, let me see where I left my heart. And that is so sweet. Oh, kind of cringe from this situation, but the line is sweet. Prue, like, makes a face about it, too, because she's like, that's not well, because,
cute. I mean, from what I'm understanding is he left her.
No, I think she left him. Because
he was like keeping things from her.
Keeping secrets and getting into trouble.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, because remember she says, and then I quit you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, you did remind me of that.
Yes. So like Prue makes that face. Phoebe and Clay kiss again, and they head towards the front door. He says, I really appreciate it. Thanks again. And she says, anything for Phoebes. Clay leaves, and Prue looks at Phoebe. Phoebe says, what? And Prue says, I can worry about my little sister, can I? And Phoebe says, don't ever stop. And then they hear a little explosion coming from the attic. And in the attic, Piper is doing a spell, and there is smoke, like, all in the air. Prue asks if she's okay. Piper says, nothing to see here. Move along. Phoebe says, welcome to London. Prue asks what she did, and Phoebe asks who she did it to, because you can see, like, a little poppet in the cauldron. Mm-hmm. And Piper says, I put a charm on Doug, but I doubled the recipe. Just something to boost his confidence so he can give love a shot and give me a break.
I'm curious to know what she used to indicate that it was him.
Yeah.
Like, did she snatch some hair while he was at work, or, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I don't know.
How do you know it's him?
Also, like, maybe we don't double the recipe on spells we've never done before.
I know. I thought that was interesting too. When she said that, I was like, okay, what is going to happen to Doug?
Yeah.
Like, what winds up happening is not what I had expected. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but
yeah,
I was expecting more, I think.
Yeah. Phoebe tells Prue to yell at her. Piper says, it's not for personal gain, and it fits into the whole harm none thing we have to live by. Besides, Prue's the one who told me to do something. Prue says, did not. Piper says, yes, you did. I just need Doug to stop dropping things so I can stop freezing things. I'm just exhausted. Prue tells her that maybe he and Shelley aren't meant to be together. Not everyone's supposed to be. Phoebe says, oh, that was real subtle, Prue.
I love how she always calls her out.
Yeah.
It makes me laugh.
Piper says, well, we'll never know unless Doug has the guts to pop the question. All I'm doing is giving it to him. And Phoebe says, oh, it's just like the cowardly lion from Wizard of Oz. And they, like, both look at her, and she goes, well, it is.
I mean, she has a very good point.
Yes. At the Buckland's auction room, the auctioneer is starting the auction. He's auctioning off some exquisite bronze-plated carvings. That's direct quote. Apparently, it's over 120 years old. So they start to auction that. Prue walks up to Mark and says, move the F. Scott Fitzgerald pen to the next slot. Our buyer, Mr. Gordonson, is getting restless. Go. So clearly Prue is, like, the head of this auction, which I love. I love them showing her that. Claire walks up to Prue. She's holding, like, a stack of paper and says that she thinks Prue should see this. Prue takes the paper from Claire, and it's the appraisal from the urn. The good news is that it's worth a fortune. The bad news is that it's stolen. Claire says, no wonder this auction house is going under, selling stolen goods. Okay, but she did the background check. How would she know it was stolen until just this moment, Claire?
Well, I think it's because she kind of jumped the gun and went ahead and listed it instead of waiting to get the background check. So I can see where Claire's coming from on that.
That's fair.
Like, she should have been more patient and more thorough before she actually listed it for all these people to try to purchase.
Yeah. Prue says this is highly unusual and it's very embarrassing. And Claire says, yes, it is. And she walks away. The auctioneer is still going, and Prue uses her powers to swap the number in front of the urn with another item because the urn is next. So the auctioneer starts talking, and he says, this beautiful 24-karat gold inlay from Egypt, and it's like a painting, which is not it. And he's like, obviously, there's been some kind of mistake, and him and the audience laugh. And to me, like, that's embarrassing. Like, if you read that out to, like, a bunch of people who are giving you $1 million, you know?
Yeah.
In Prue's office, she notices Palmer's in there. She asks who he is. He says, you must be Prue, Phoebe's sister. Prue says, same question. Who are you? Palmer says, I'm a friend of Clay's. Why didn't you sell that urn? You were supposed to sell it. Prue tells him to leave. And Palmer says, no, you don't understand. You have to sell it before the curse. Prue asks, what curse? And Palmer says, the urn is cursed and he's going to get rid of it himself. So he walks towards the urn and Prue uses her power to move it. She, like, gasps and she goes, oh my God, the curse.
She played it well. She really did.
She moves it again and goes, what's going on? So Palmer says, the curse, it's happening, it's too late, I gotta get out of here.
And then he darts off.
Runs out of the room.
I love how she, like, smirks.
Yeah.
Like, I did that. There's
She's
no
like,
curse.
What a curse. Oh my god, so scary.
Until she actually finds out
Yes.
about the curse.
Outside, Phoebe and Piper are walking on the sidewalk. Phoebe asks Piper if she believes people deserve second chances. Piper says, absolutely. It's probably why I want to help Doug out so much. Phoebe says, okay, well, Clay says he can change, and I want to believe him. And Piper says, but you're afraid of getting hurt. That's totally understandable. Phoebe says, so I keep my distance, and then what? Hope that I'm wrong? Piper says, well, you could be. That premonition of yours was definitely in the future. Phoebe says, but the problem is I keep thinking about the past. When I moved to New York, I was so angry. All right, I was scared. And then I met Clay, and he helped me out a lot. It was really good to me at a time in my life when nobody else was. And Piper's like,
Hello.
Excuse me?
Yep.
Like, so Phoebe says, sorry, you know what I mean. I didn't mean it like that. He kept living beyond his means. Oh, Piper asks, why'd you leave him? And Phoebe says, he kept living beyond his means. He never thought of the future. Yeah, I know that sounds familiar. But let's just say he took one too many shortcuts, got involved with some bad people, got in over his head, way over his head. And finally, I just couldn't take it anymore. I had to leave. And Piper says, so now he's back, hoping to be the man you fell in love with originally. Phoebe asks what she's supposed to do, because what if he's the one? Like you say, Doug and Shelley are. Do I just walk away? We can't live together forever. What do you expect, to be 60 years old and still sharing clothes and a cat? No, I don't think it will be alive. I think the rest of it.
I kind of feel like that's how it would be.
Yeah.
Like, if you're a witch, you've got your coven, and you are all, like, you feed off of each other's magic.
Right.
Like, it makes you stronger when you're together, so why not still live together? And I get not doing that because, like, I could not live with my sisters. No.
Piper says, now that you put it that way, no, I don't want to live with you anymore. So Phoebe and Piper get into Quake, and Doug, he's at the bar shaking a cocktail shaker, and he does, like, a little spin, and he's, like, clearly doing, like, a whole show.
Like, he has a personality now.
Yes. There are, like, tons of women at the bar staring at him. Piper says, oh, boy. Phoebe says, I thought your charm was to boost his confidence, not turn him into Tom Cruise. Piper says, well, maybe I shouldn't have doubled the recipe. Duh. Piper walks over to the bar, says, Doug, what's going on? He says, not sure, but whatever it is, I feel great. Shelley walks up to the bar, and Doug, like, looks at her, and then he, like, pushes a drink down to the end of the bar, so it, like, slides.
He definitely gives her the cold shoulder.
Yes. So Shelley walks away, and Piper asks, like, what about Shelley? And Doug says, who cares about Shelley when I've got Thursday, Friday, and Saturday all lined up and waiting? Ew.
Yeah. Yep.
He looks at Phoebe and says, I don't believe I've had the pleasure. Piper says, I don't believe you will. Off limits. So Doug walks away, and Phoebe says, your charm worked. You've turned Doug into Piper says, a monster. Phoebe says, I gotta go. I told Clay I'd meet him over at the house. And she kisses Piper on the cheek, says bye, and she leaves. We cut into the hotel. Palmer's walking into his room. He starts packing his duffel bag when the guardian of the urn appears. The guardian says, leaving? And Palmer asks how she got there. The guardian said, I came with your friend. I waited for your fear to consume you. Where is the urn? Palmer tells her that it's at the Buckland auction house. He says, I tried to get it back. I was going to return it, I swear. I tried to make things right. Please. And then she makes, like, a scorpion appear on her dress, and she puts it on him. And he says, I'm sorry. No, no, no. And the scorpion stings him as she's saying, you're being punished for your greed.
I wish that there was more, like, movement and action for when the Wes and Palmer like got killed. Mm-hmm. Like the spider gets on him, the scorpion gets on him, and they're not trying to like get it off. Like I get a tiny bug on me and I'm like whacking it off, you know, we all do it. It's like, ooh, no. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, I've stepped in spider webs before and I've went crazy and like shaking my head, getting it off my arms, but there's none of that.
Yeah. The way that he lays there, it's like he's tied up, but he's not. But he, like, doesn't move his arms at all. He just, like, lays there and takes it.
And that's what I'm getting at is, like, why couldn't there be more, like, try to get it off? Because if there's a scorpion, like, it's going to be more threatened and attack you more. So I don't know if maybe she was using some type of control over him or what, but I did not care for how they were just easily killed and didn't do anything.
Yeah. See, I'm gonna tell you right now, like, my mom's house has scorpions, and they're not the kind of scorpions like in Egypt. Like, they won't kill you. They do hurt, though.
I'm sure.
And they're like little tiny white guys. They're like cave scorpions.
My sister's had them in her house before.
Get one of those on you and see how you react.
You're gonna freak out.
Because, like, we used to stay in the basement. The basement has scorpions really bad. And, like, you would find them, like, in your bed and, like, all kinds of stuff. And you'll freak out.
And you wouldn't think that here in the Midwest, good old downtown Missouri, we would have scorpions, but we do.
I know. Every time, sometimes I tell people that, and they're like, "Yes, scorpions."
I'm like, no, you don't. And it's like, no, I promise you.
I swear I have scorpions. Yeah. Yeah. Why would I lie about that? Yeah. Cut to the manor. We're in Phoebe's room. Clay's sitting on the bed, and Phoebe is picking out a dress. She's saying, "So the band goes on at 10, but if we get there before 9, there's no cover. You interested?" And he says, "In anything that involves you." Okay.
I feel like he's trying too hard.
Yeah. She gives him, like, a look, and she holds up 2 dresses, and he picks one, but she throws that one on the ground, and they laugh, because I guess that's something that they've done before. At least that was the idea I got.
That's what I got as well.
Clay says, "I miss this, the day-to-day of us." Phoebe says, "Me too. I'm going to change now." And then she, like, does, like, a little, like, head shake. And he says, "Oh, you want me to leave?" Phoebe says, "That's kind of a loaded question. But yeah, I think that would be best." Clay tells Phoebe, "We did live together. It's not like we haven't." And Phoebe says, "Yeah, I know, but things have changed."
Like, how many times does she have to tell him that she's
changed? Honestly. Clay tells her to sit down, and she does. And she says, "We're very different." Clay says, "Do we have to be?" And he starts kissing her neck, which I didn't like. Like, I know that she says, like, "You can continue, like, here in a minute." But, like, at this point, she has been like, "Can you leave so I can get undressed? This is not the vibe. We're not doing this." I
wasn't feeling this scene at all, though. Like, even though, like, she was clearly, like, conflicted. Like, she was turned on by him. She wanted it. But at the same time, for her personally, like, her inner voice is like, no, this is not what you want.
Yeah.
And so you can clearly tell that she was conflicted. And I feel like she was more conflicted than turned on in this case.
I thought her body language was, like, very rigid.
It was very stiff.
Yeah. Not like she wanted to be doing that.
Yeah. Like, it was almost forced.
Yes.
Or her trying to just settle and, like, make him happy kind of thing.
Right.
Like, I didn't care for this scene at all.
Yeah.
Like, there was no passion. Like, even in her face. Like, even though, as you mentioned, she was like, "Okay, yeah, go ahead and continue, you know, go for it." But even then, there really wasn't any passion.
Yeah.
Like, she did not look like she was into it.
Yes. So just a friendly reminder that just because someone doesn't explicitly say no, doesn't mean they're saying yes.
No means no.
Yes. And you can say no in a variety of ways, and that includes your body language. So anyway, they have this whole moment that's very uncomfortable. She does tell him to stop, and he does.
Yes.
And then she says, "Okay, go." And then she says, "What am I doing? Okay, you know, this isn't fair because I love it when you," and then he kisses her and they lay it down on the bed and they proceed to do spicy actions. I just was not a fan of that.
No, I feel like there could have been, because, I mean, I feel like you've had, like, a lot of people have had moments where they are conflicted and, you know, they want something so bad, but at the same time, they know they shouldn't. But you're still like, okay, let's do it. And there's more passion to it. And there really was no passion to that.
I agree.
And I don't know if maybe that's just because, you know, of the era that it was going on, or if maybe this was her first like love scene that she'd ever done.
I don't know. But I just didn't feel like it was very in character for Phoebe either, because she's a very passionate person.
Yeah, it was odd. And
yeah.
It was just, it wasn't a good scene.
Mm-mm. We cut down to the living room, and Piper is reading the Book of Shadows, and she's writing something when Prue walks in the front door. And I saw that, and I was like, Piper, Clay is in your house. Why are you reading the Book of Shadows just on the couch in the living room?
I think she just knew what was happening and was not concerned about it. Because I feel like if I was in her situation, I would probably be doing the same thing.
I was like, girl.
Like, I need something to keep my mind occupied so I don't hear what's going on upstairs.
Piper tells Prue that she scared her. Prue says, where's Phoebe? Piper says she's upstairs, but you might wanna... And Prue walks away and she goes, knock.
I feel like she could have been a little more louder than that.
Yeah.
Prue would have still heard her.
Yeah.
But maybe she was just too focused on her end goal.
Yes. Upstairs, Prue swings the door open to Phoebe's room, does not knock, says, Phoebe, we need to talk. And you see Phoebe and Clay naked in bed together. Phoebe says, yes, we do. Prue makes like an absolutely disgusted face.
I think she even said ew or something, or gross. It was pretty funny. But at the same time, what did you expect? Come on, girl. Like, her, for one, if a bedroom door is shut and that bedroom door belongs to an adult, knock.
Yeah.
Whether you know what's going on or not. Just knock.
Really? You never know what could be happening in there, you know? Anyway, in the foyer, Phoebe and Clay are standing at the doorway. Prue's standing there too. Phoebe is telling Clay that he doesn't have to leave. And Phoebe says, okay, well, I'll call you. So Clay leaves. Phoebe closes the door, turns to Prue, and says, I hope you liked the show.
Fair.
Phoebe says, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. And Phoebe says, what? That it was my room that you barged into? I had more privacy when I lived in New York, a tiny island crawling with 8 million people.
I do feel like this little snippet of the episode was probably my favorite out of the entire episode.
Yeah.
The rest of it just felt very uninteresting to me.
Same. Prue says, at least one thief. And Phoebe says, I'm sorry, excuse me? She's still like, this is not the time to bring it up because she is so heated.
Yeah.
But Prue says, my boss handed this to me, thankfully just before the urn could be sold. And she hands Phoebe the paper that Claire had given her earlier. She says, Clay didn't buy that at some outdoor bazaar, Phoebe. He stole it. Phoebe denies it. And Piper says, well, it looks right, Phoebe. Prue says, seasons change. People don't. Okay, you're not better than everyone, Prue.
Yeah, that was a very big insult to, like, not only Clay, but I do feel like it was like a jab to Phoebe.
Yeah, she says, I changed. Do you remember what you thought of me before I walked back through that door? Prue says it's different because she's her sister. Phoebe says, well, there's got to be some mistake with this. Prue says it gets worse. If the background information is accurate, there's a curse attached to the urn. Anyone who steals it could end up dead, a victim of the guardian who protects it, and she feeds off of their greed. Phoebe says, well, even if that's true, Clay could never have known about it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought it here. Piper asks if she's sure, because she wouldn't be the first Halliwell to misjudge a guy. And Phoebe says, it's not about judging, it's about knowing. And I know Clay. Prue says, and I know what Clay has done. He put my job in jeopardy. He lied to me, and he lied to you. Phoebe says, you don't know that. Look, I'm not saying he's perfect, and even if he is foolish enough to risk his own life, he would never risk mine. What do you...
I mean, I don't know.
Well, you dumped him, didn't talk to him for 5 months, and then he showed up immediately asking you for favors, so...
Yeah, like,
and,
like, she's not priority.
Yeah. So she walks away, and then we cut into the hotel. The police are in Palmer's room. The coroner is looking at the sting on Palmer's neck, and he says, I didn't know any better. I'd say this was a scorpion sting. Andy's like, no, it's not. I'm going to tell you right now, no, it's not, because there's no scorpions in San Francisco. You're dumb. The coroner says, well, that's what it looks like. And Andy asks if there's any chance he was killed somewhere else and moved here. The coroner says no. And Andy says, well, I buy this place has roaches. I'm not so sure about scorpions. Anything else? Coroner says he found a business card in his pocket for Buckland's auction house. And Andy says, let me guess. Prue Halliwell. The coroner asks how he knows, and Andy says he's cursed. He says, let me know when you get the report back on the sting, because he still does not believe it's a scorpion. So as he leaves, he bumps into Clay, and Clay looks into the room and sees Palmer getting zipped up into the body bag. And then we cut to Buckland's auction house. We're in Prue's office. The picture of the Guardian shows back up on the urn as Claire and Prue walk in. Claire is reading through the profits that they made out of the different lots in the auction. She goes to lot 51, which was the urn. She says it was excluded. She asks if that should not be turned into the proper authorities. And Prue says, I'm contacting customs as soon as we're finished here. Look, again, I just want to assure you I didn't have anything to do with... And Claire says, just handle it. How did we do? Prue smiles. She says, 1.28 million. We did it. Claire says that the auction house lives to see another day. Congratulations. And they shake hands, and Claire tells her that she did good work. Prue says thank you as Andy walks in. So she greets him and asks if he's here to arrest her again. Andy says, not this time. And he sees a picture of like a scorpion on the urn. He says, a scorpion? Why am I not surprised? Andy. Prue's confused, and Andy says, a young man died last night of a scorpion sting. Palmer Kellogg, you know him? Prue says no, and Andy says, well, obviously he knew you. I found your card on his body. Prue tells him that they just had an auction, so she met a lot of people. I just feel like, Prue, you could be like, there was a creeper in my office. Maybe it was him. That's not a secret. You didn't do anything to him.
Yeah.
You
but
know?
She wouldn't know that that was him.
Yeah.
At the same time.
True. He never told her his name, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he did. I don't remember.
I don't think he did.
He might have just said, I'm a friend of Clay's.
Yeah, like she had asked him twice
Yeah.
what his name was, and all he said was a friend of Clay's or
True.
whatever it was. So
Andy says he'll bring by a photo later to see if it jogs anything. And Prue says that's fine. Why didn't you bring a photo, Andy? You just here to chat?
yeah, because he literally went there to talk about the guy.
Yeah. Maybe come prepared, Andy.
Uh-huh. Instead of seeing your love fling.
Instead of seeing a reason to come back later, you know?
Or maybe that was the point, right?
Yeah. Andy says, Prue, listen, just because we're not dating anymore, I want you to know I still care about you. So if you're ever in a jam or you ever need anything, just know you can always call me. Prue says, I know. Thanks. And
I feel like that was like random.
Yeah.
Like just giving Andy lines.
True. At Clay's hotel room, he's packing when someone knocks at the door. It is Phoebe. So he opens it up and she immediately says, you stole the urn, didn't you? Clay asks if she wants to come inside, and Phoebe says, no, I'm not going anywhere until you answer the question. And he says, okay, yes. And then she immediately walks inside.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I like his honesty
Mm-hmm.
in that one point.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess technically he has been honest the entire time, other than stating that he bought it at the market.
True. Phoebe sees his like half-packed bag on the bed and asks if he was planning on saying goodbye before he skipped town. Clay tells her that Palmer is dead and he died from a scorpion sting. I called Wesley to tell him, and that's when his parents tell me that he's dead too. Spider bites. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I know one thing. I am not going to stick around. Phoebe calls him a liar. And Clay is like, I am not lying. I don't know what you're talking about. Phoebe says, you knew the urn was cursed when you stole it. You knew the legend. Clay asks what she's talking about. And Phoebe says, are you telling me that you didn't know whoever steals the urn dies? Clay says, Palmer and Wesley, I swear, I know nothing about it. Phoebe does not believe him. And Clay says, you have to believe me. Phoebe says, no, I don't. You're a liar, Clay, and you will never change. You will always look for the easy way out. And she leaves. At Quake, Piper is sitting at the bar. Doug is putting glasses down on the shelf when he sees Shelly and he drops the glass. He says, I'll get the broom. And Phoebe walks up to Piper and says, I see you reversed the spell. Piper says, yeah, and I've been given till tomorrow to fire him. Phoebe says, well, maybe Prue was right. Maybe they just don't belong together. Seems like the theme of the day. Piper asks if she's talking about Clay. Phoebe says, he totally used me, Piper. He just used me to get to Prue. Piper says, I'm sorry. That's like the worst, too.
You used your sister.
You know?
Or her sister.
Like, not even like, oh, he used me to get to a friend. My sister, man.
Yeah, that's a no-no.
Yeah.
Whether it's romantic or not.
Yeah. Phoebe tells her thanks for not saying I told you so. And then she asks why she didn't see it coming. She says, what am I, a sucker for punishment? Piper says, no, you see the good in people, and that's never wrong. Besides, the wrong guys are usually the most interesting. Until you get your hopes up and let your guard down, and then they reveal their true selves.
Fact.
Piper says, look at Doug. Great guy, kind of boring on the surface, easy to overlook. But maybe in the long run, we're better off with his type. Phoebe says, maybe way in the long run. I think I'm still looking for adventure. And Piper tells her that that means she risks paying the price. Then they hear a crash. Doug shouts, I got it. And Piper says, maybe it's a price worth paying. Phoebe says, thanks for the ear. And then she gets up to leave. And we're at the manor now. The doorbell rings. So Phoebe answers it. And it is Clay. He asks if he can come in. And she says, no. He says, look, I maybe lied about the urn, but I swear I didn't know it was cursed. Phoebe says, well, that still makes you a thief, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. Mm-hmm. Clay says, well, that's why I'm here. I want to make things right. I want to turn myself into the police. I mean it, Phoebe, honest. It's the only way I can redeem myself with you. Phoebe asks how she knows this isn't just another one of his scams. And Clay says, well, I guess you don't, but I don't want to take shortcuts anymore. I want to take the urn with me to the police. There's no way Prue's just going to give it to me, not without you. I need your help. It's the last favor I'll ever ask, I promise. Phoebe says, I don't think so. So Clay pleads with her. He touches her arm, and Phoebe has a premonition of a snake about to attack Clay. I think it's a cobra.
Yes, it is.
I don't know a lot about snakes, so but
I only knew it was a cobra because of the head.
The hood, yeah. Mm-hmm. Phoebe says, the curse. Clay says, what? Phoebe says, let's go, and she yanks him out the door. So we're at Buckland's at Prue's office. Prue is there when Phoebe and Clay walk in. Prue asks Phoebe what he's doing there. Phoebe says, save it till later. I've seen the future and it's not bright. Oh, good. You haven't given the urn to the police. Prue says, yeah, no, I thought that might get you into trouble. Phoebe says, yeah, well, you know that little legend we were talking about? Well, the Guardian materializes. And she says, I think it's true. Clay says, what the hell is that? Prue tells Phoebe to get him out of here. And she pushes him out the door. Then Prue tries to use her power on the Guardian, but it does not work. It barely affects her. Mm-hmm. The Guardian says, I don't want to harm you. I came for the thief. Prue asks who she is, and she says, I'm the Guardian of the urn. You cannot destroy me. So Prue uses her power again, and the Guardian just gets slightly pushed back.
She's very annoyed by that.
Yes. So Prue tells Phoebe to run, and they do. And Guardian says, so now there will more who will die.
Which I don't understand why she said that, because previously it was whoever steals the urn will die.
Well, the Guardian may think that they're trying to protect Clay and keep the urn, so they're on the same team as Clay. And I think the Guardian realizes later that they're not really part of it, but
yeah,
whatever.
Maybe.
So she disappears. We cut to the manor. Prue, Phoebe, and Clay all walk through the front door. Clay is saying, I still don't understand. And Phoebe says, you stay down here. We'll be right back. So Piper walks in, asks what's going on, and Prue tells her that they will tell her in the attic. So they all head for the stairs. Clay asks where they're going, and Phoebe says, fill her in. I'll meet you guys upstairs. And then to Clay, she says, Piper's really into legends, and Prue's really good with her mind. So, what? Clay says, yeah, but that thing, the Guardian, she's not even... And Phoebe says, human? Yeah, I know, but she's real, and we have to figure out how to stop her before she gets you. Clay says, I know what you're thinking, Phoebe. I do not want you to get hurt because of me. And Phoebe says, I think I actually believe you. She smiles. She runs upstairs. In the attic, Prue and Piper are flipping through the Book of Shadows. Phoebe asks if they found anything, and Piper says nothing about Egyptian urns or greed demons. Zip. Prue says, well, let's just hope she didn't follow us here because our powers are useless against her. Piper asks how that's even possible because that's never happened before. And Prue says, well, maybe we're not supposed to protect him. Phoebe asks what that means. Prue says, all I'm saying is that maybe there's a reason, like Piper trying to force Doug and Shelley back together again. Maybe there are just some things that we're not supposed to save. Phoebe says, no, we're saving Clay, period. There has to be something that we're missing. Piper says, well, maybe this is something. It doesn't talk about the urn, but it talks about the 7 deadly sins, greed being one of them. Prue says, well, wait a minute. The guardian punishes the greedy. So maybe if Clay does something selfless, it'll even the score. And Piper says, good luck. Both Prue and Phoebe give her like a dirty look.
Yeah. Like, really, Piper?
Yes. So they all go downstairs and Clay is nowhere to be found. Phoebe says, I don't believe it. And Piper says she's sorry. And Phoebe says, no, like, I really don't believe it. He just wouldn't leave like that. Prue asks if she has a better explanation. And Phoebe says, well, he was worried about me. He was worried about us. I'm telling you. Wait, my vision. I think I know where he's gone. We've got to stop him. So they go to Buckland's in Prue's office. The guardian appears as Clay walks in. She says, I knew you'd come back. Your greed consumes you. He says, I'm not here for the urn. She says, you must be punished. He says, I know. When you're done with me, that's it, right? You're not going to hurt anybody else? She says, not until somebody steals the urn again. He asks how she knows anybody will. And she says, somebody always does.
And if during this, she's holding a gold snake.
Yeah.
And immediately when I see that, because it's kind of lit up, it reminded me of Wonder Woman's lasso of truth. Like, that's all I kept thinking was, like, maybe that's where her lasso came from.
Right.
Because that's what it looked like. I thought that was kind of funny.
That is funny. So she throws that golden lasso thing down, and a snake appears in front of Clay as Prue, Piper, and Phoebe run in. Clay tells Phoebe to stay back. Phoebe says no. Prue tells Phoebe to look out as the snake goes to bite Phoebe, but Clay puts his arm up in front of Phoebe, and the snake disappears. Phoebe says, a selfless act, just like the Book of Shadows says. The Book of Shadows did not say that.
Also, like, why was there anything in there about the 7 sins? Like, that's the greed is one of the 7 sins. So it makes me wonder, like, are the other...
So there is an episode in the future that is about Pandora's box. It's actually one of my favorite episodes. So that's a little bit of foreshadowing for them using that page in the future. That's way later because that's with Paige.
I just found it interesting that there was anything mentioned about that in the Book of Shadows. Because I feel like the Book of Shadows is more about spells. And what does that have to do with the 7 sins?
Well, I think it's just got like a lot of lore and like mythical things and things that they could experience. And who knows, a Halliwell witch could have been around when they were putting all the sins in the box. You know?
Yeah, that's fair.
Anyway, Piper asks where it went because the guardian and the urn both disappear when that happens.
Turns into sparkly glitter and vanishes.
Yes. Prue says, who cares as long as it's not here? Clay asks if Phoebe's okay, and she says, am I okay? Who says people never change? And she hugs Clay. So we're at Quake. Prue, Piper, and Phoebe are all sitting at the bar. Piper says, good thing we didn't have to end up using our powers to vanquish her. Otherwise, Clay would have seen us. Prue says they didn't work anyway. Phoebe says, well, it's not something I hope ever happens again. So Doug walks over. He's holding a tray of glasses when Shelley kind of like walks near. Piper says, oh, forgot about Doug. And Doug drops the tray. So Piper freezes it. Prue tells her that it's getting ridiculous. Piper says, tell me about it. That engagement ring's probably still burning a hole in his apron. So Prue gets up and walks over to Doug, and she says, I'm solving your problems and keeping you employed. She takes the ring box out of Doug's pocket and puts it on the floor. Then she sits back down as they unfreeze.
I kind of feel like that moment would have been a Phoebe moment, not a Prue moment.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting that it was Prue, and again, not Phoebe.
Yeah. Doug apologizes to Shelley, and Shelley notices the ring on the floor. She picks it up, opens it, and gasps. And Doug says, I was carrying that around for weeks, trying to find the right time to ask you. Shelley says, ask you what? And Doug says, to, marry me. And Shelley says, but that's why I broke up with you. I gave up on waiting. Okay, maybe, like, have a conversation with your partner about, like, hey, I would really like to take this next step into commitment. Not, like, put a secret expiration date in your brain.
Yeah, or have expectations that they're just gonna know.
Right. Yeah, I don't love that, Shelley. Kind of toxic. Okay. Anyway, they smile and hug because they don't think it's toxic. I do. Piper says, this would have happened sooner if I would have kept my little wicked nose out of their business. Phoebe says, you can't change people. They have to change themselves, which is true. Prue says, speaking of that, yum. What? Clay walks up, and then she tells Prue, she says, "Go, baby." Piper says, "Go, girl." So Phoebe goes. She says, so Phoebe goes. She walks up to Clay. They greet each other. She says, "I'm glad you stopped by." Clay says, "Any chance you're going to come back with me?" And Phoebe says, "No, this is my home now." Clay says, "I know I lied to you about a lot of things, but one thing I never lied to you about was how much I care about you." Phoebe says she knows, and they kiss. Clay says, "I guess I should be going." He says, "You know, I hope the next time we cross paths, I'll be the guy you always think you see." Phoebe tells him goodbye, and he leaves. And Prue and Piper walk up to her. Prue asks if she's okay. Phoebe says, "Oh yeah, he was just stopping by on his way home. No big deal." Piper says, "Heard that before." And they both hug her, and we cut to credits. So who was your Witch of the Week?
So I did not have a Witch of the Week because I just was not feeling this episode. Again, I felt like it was slow. It was uninteresting to me. And I just was not really feeling it. So unfortunately, I do not have a Witch of the Week. What about you?
I have like a very low-key Witch of the Week. Like, I really liked Piper in this episode, just like doing her best. And like, she had funny lines. She was just doing her best to try to get Doug and Shelley back together, man. She was like, "I'm not going to fire Doug. Okay, he's just going through a rough time.
He is worth saving."
Yes. And she, was helpful. She was studying the Book of Shadows in her spare time, doing all the things. I love that about Piper. But honestly, like, I just did not like the interactions between Clay and Phoebe. So, like, could not have been her, Mm-hmm. And I think Prue was like, I did have a lot of like good Prue moments. And I definitely like think it aligned with her character very well. It just also was annoying at the same time. Like, just chill. She's a literal grown adult.
Yeah.
Chill just a tiny bit.
She is very judgy.
The unfortunate thing is that she's right. So.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's it for today's episode of Spells and Spoilers. Thanks for hanging out with us. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and follow us on Instagram at Spells and Spoilers and TikTok at Spells and Spoilers Pod for more. We'll be back next time with more supernatural fun. See you later.
Bye.